never forget that feeling. It was the scariest feeling in the entire world, but you're just done.
There is no other explanation as to how he was able to survive all that he went through in Mexico.
The State Department heightening its warning to Americans traveling to Mexico, where violent crimes are on the rise, even in tourist destinations.
When U.S. citizen Dustan Jackson visited Cancun for a fun vacation with his wife, he was looking forward to having a nice time, but it ended up being his worst nightmare and almost took his life. Hours before boarding his flight home, Jackson ended up in the clutches of one of the ruthless cartels of Mexico. The incident not only scarred him for life, but also left irreparable damage on his body. The incident gave him memories that would haunt him till the last day of his life. So, what happened on that fateful day? How did he encounter the cartel member? How did he escape them? Stay tuned as we tell you the chilling story of Dustan Jackson, the man who barely made it alive after a gruesome attack by Mexico's notorious narcotics cartel members. Dustan Jackson was in a great mood after spending the perfect vacation with his wife in Cancun in February 2023. They had just celebrated Valentine's Day and were waiting for their return flight to Salt Lake City. A few hours before the flight, Jackson decided to get some chewing tobacco. He looked for it in the airport shops, but couldn't find it. With enough time in hand, he decided to rush to the nearest grocery store to grab it. He got in a cab and visited the nearest gas station, but they didn't have it in stock either. He was disappointed, but his cab driver told him that he could take him to another grocery store that had the product. Jackson agreed to visit that place. Their cab halted in front of the shop. Jackson got out of the car and walked inside the building. It was dark inside, and before he could understand anything, someone hit him in the head from behind. Jackson had never suspected the cab driver and had let his guard down, and the cab driver had kidnapped him.
He says there's going to be just a grocery store. So I get out and I'm like, okay, as I'm walking in, then boom, lights out. Next thing I know, I am waking up in a ditch.
Jackson had walked out of the airport to get chewing tobacco at 10 in the morning, but when he woke up, it was already dark outside. He felt pain in different parts of his body. All came rushing to him at once. It was apparent that he had been mugged and the driver had wounded him badly. His credit card was missing. As Jackson moved his body, horror hit him. The driver had tried to disable his foot so that he wouldn't be able to move or walk away. So, he slashed his foot, but he was unsuccessful. And now the bottom of Jackson's foot was still attached to the rest like a flap.
They filleted off the entire bottom of my foot. So they went to cut my Achilles tendon and they missed. And instead of hitting it, they hit the bottom of the foot and then my foot just flapped around.
He also had multiple wounds and bruises on the left side of his body, which were created by a sharp object or weapon. The driver had tried everything he could to ensure that Jackson wouldn't make out of this incident alive. And then, he dumped Jackson in a ditch. After gaining consciousness, Jackson battled the unbearable pain and crawled out of the ditch. He scrambled onto the dark streets to seek help. He didn't know Spanish and had no chance of communicating with the locals. He spent hours roaming around, screaming for help, but no one looked in his direction. He eventually found a police station and asked for help from the on-duty officers, but to his dismay, they turned him away.
The first cops that I ran into, I swear it was a police station at least, they told me to go away,
he said. Unable to find help anywhere, he then found a tarp and crawled under it. He'd given up on life at this point and knew that he wasn't going to make it alive. So, waited there and counted his last breaths. But then Jackson remembered his wife and beautiful children who were waiting for him in the United States. He decided to fight one last time for the people he loved. He knew he had to survive for them.
At this point, this is when, however long I was laying there, pretty much just waiting to die, something inside of me, that strength came to me and said, you got family, you got kids, get up.
Jackson went back to the streets. People walked past him, but no one listened to his pleas. But eventually, a female officer saw him and decided to help. She drove him to the airport. Jackson wondered why she hadn't driven him to the hospital instead. Anyone who came across a wounded person would do the same, but he believed that this had worked to his advantage and helped him save time and hassle. Hospital authorities could have detained him and involved police, which could further complicate the entire issue.
Why didn't she take me to the hospital? I don't know. Some of the horror stories I've heard, I'm glad that she didn't, because I could have been stuck down there. Who knows?
Says Jackson. However, more struggles awaited Jackson. At the airport, he didn't have access to his phone. and didn't know Spanish. He had no way of contacting his wife, who had likely left Mexico by that time. Jackson was looking like a wounded person, and this created a disadvantage for him. People at the airport were looking at him funny and were avoiding him. After much hassle, Jackson managed to collect a wheelchair, but since he didn't have a valid air ticket, the authorities snatched it away from him. Jackson was back on the ground. Even at this point, no one came to his rescue. After some time, an international traveler named Kayla Jackson noticed him and came to listen to his story. She decided to help him. She made a call to his wife in the States. Jackson calls him her guardian angel.
And finally, this lady from Africa, her flight got canceled. That's why she stopped.
Jackson's wife transferred some money immediately. Kayla used it to buy him an air ticket and also checked him into a hotel. His passport and bags were already at the airport, and he didn't face any other difficulty in flying back home. After landing in the United States, Jackson immediately went for treatment. He had sustained severe nerve damage and had to spend months in the hospital, praying for recovery and return to normal life. Apart from his foot injury, Jackson had a broken shoulder. Doctors spent months trying to put it back to its original state. However, after 4 surgeries, they had to resort to installing artificial joints inside to support the frame. His shoulder isn't real anymore, and the doctors suspect that he broke it while the abductor threw him out of the cab.
My shoulder's completely fake now. There is no more real bone in there. And the doctors think it's from them throwing you out of a vehicle, probably.
He can't play sports that require throwing, which means he isn't a companion during his kids' playtime. However, Jackson is just happy to be home and back with his family once again. And what does Jackson think about this life? Well, he believes that he survived miraculously. The wounds in his body were fatal, and the attack should have claimed his life, but it hadn't. After he'd gained consciousness, Jackson had almost given up hope on life, but due to some miracle, he continued to fight back. He was stranded in a strange city and didn't know the language. Yet, he'd made it out alive. It still feels like a nightmare to him. Jackson isn't taking this second chance at life for granted, and he is making the most of the new life that he's been gifted.
I take the little times in life. I don't take them for granted anymore. You just don't know what life's going to bring you. So never give up. Keep going. Everybody has a purpose.
He is using his new life to tell his story to millions around the world in hopes of shedding some light on the brutality faced by many tourists visiting Mexico. Hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to Mexico every year, and if they're not careful, they can also fall prey to these abductors who have no humanity. After the incident, Jackson couldn't return to his job, but he opened a YouTube channel and uploads videos on it regularly. He is writing a book detailing his horrific experience in Cancun. He wants more people to know his story, and so he's raising money through crowdfunding to turn his tale into a documentary. Jackson believes that listening to his story will alert more people and might even save a few lives. Jackson was subjected to the worst experience of his life in Mexico, but he didn't file an official complaint at the US Embassy in Mexico. He knew that it wouldn't bring him any results. However, the news made its way to the US government. On the other hand, Cancun authorities launched their own investigation to find the perpetrator. Given the country's history, no one is really hopeful about any arrests or attempts to bring justice to Jackson. But it's shameful that the same authorities refused to take any steps when Jackson was wounded and begging for help on the streets of Cancun. He was put through the same levels of hassle at the airport. They had taken his wheelchair away and refused to help him in any way. However, when asked about this incident, the police team at Cancun Airport claimed that they weren't aware of any such incident and didn't have any knowledge of the attack. This only goes to show their lack of integrity and accountability in dire situations such as this one. This is not the first time the Mexican police or authorities have shown reluctance to take action against the ongoing brutality and random abductions. Thousands of people go missing in Mexico every year, and the families of the victims never really get justice. As of March 2023, around 112,000 people are reported missing in the country, and no one really knows if they will ever be found. This is only the number of locals, but the number of missing tourists will shock you. Cartel violence is nothing new in Mexico, but the popular tourist destinations used to remain untouched. However, multiple accidents have occurred in Mexico since 2018, proving that the tourists aren't safe anymore.
Just this week, police reported gunmen on jet skis showed up in the heart of Cancun's hotel zone, opening fire as frightened tourists ran for cover.
Mexican authorities have deployed as many as 1,500 National Guards in popular tourist locations in Cancun to minimize the attacks. But the question is, why do they happen in tourist areas? Well, the investigation revealed that tourists might not be the prime targets of these attackers at all.
Experts say in most of these attacks, tourists are not the intended target. Instead, cartel disputes are now permeating tourist areas.
And, unfortunately, the tourists themselves might be the reason for this sudden spike in cartel disputes.
Those disputes are fueled in part by the increased demand for drugs, thanks in part to an increase in tourism. Others blame the violence on poor policing in the area.
Experts have asked tourists to stay in big hotel chains with an established name. They tend to have strong security, and the tourists won't face any danger. Alternatively, they asked tourists to sign up for the Smart Traveler Enrollment Programs. It's a free federal program that provides tourists with resources if they face any troubles during vacations. A recent report claims that around 550 Americans are reported missing in Mexico as of March 2023, many of whom possibly turned into victims of the Mexican cartel wars and mindless abductions. But that didn't discourage the Americans from visiting Mexico for holidays. The country is a popular tourist destination for them, and the number of tours is growing every day.
Passenger volume between the US and Mexico this January 2023, actually up 24% compared to the same month in 2019. That's a larger rise than any other international destination. Mexico is a true favorite of American tourists.
U.S. authorities can't ensure protection for all these tourists. So, the U.S. State Department issued a travel advisory in summer 2023.
State Department heightening its warning to Americans traveling to Mexico where violent crimes are on the rise, even in tourist destinations.
Tourists were advised to remain cautious when traveling in Cancun and Cabo, and reconsider visiting popular tourist destinations such as Puerto Vallarta. The State Department put a do not travel advisory on 6 Mexican states: Zacatecas, Tamaulipas, Sinaloa, Michoacan, Guerrero, and Colima.
The travel advisory for Tamaulipas State remains at level 4. Do not travel. We encourage Americans to heed that advice.
Victims like Dustan Jackson are battling their trauma every day. Yet, they're using their courage and willpower to let the world know of the atrocities they faced at the hands of those ruthless culprits. Thousands of locals are requesting the government to take steps against the cartel violence. And if their pleas can't awaken the authorities, nothing else can. In October 2021, another U.S. tourist lost her life when she was caught in cartel gunfire. San Jose-based travel vlogger and engineer Anjali Riot visited Tulum, Mexico with her husband to celebrate her 30th birthday. She posted multiple pictures of her vacation on her Instagram account. On October 20th, Anjali visited La Malcarita restaurant for dinner. After finishing her meal, she sat on the terrace and spoke to her fellow travelers. At 10:30 in the evening, a man came running inside the restaurant, followed by 4 men with guns. They fired at a nearby table, but a few bullets hit Anjali and a German woman. Anjali lost her life immediately.
Video captured moments after the shooting appears to show a woman lying on the ground as others gather around to help. Shortly after, an ambulance arrives.
The German woman lost her life after she was taken to the hospital. 2 other women were also wounded during the incident. They were of Dutch and German nationality. The German Foreign Office issued an urgent travel advisory for German tourists right after the incident.
If you are currently in the Tulum or Playa del Carmen area, do not leave your secured hotel facilities.
Investigation later revealed that the gun battle took place between street-level narcotics dealers belonging to 2 cartels: the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or the CJNG, and the Los Pelones Cartel, which is a wing of the Gulf Cartel. The cartels are still running their operations, but Anjali will never come back. In May 2023, a 23-year-old Argentinian footballer called Benjamin Gamond went to Tulum to work as a waiter and earn some cash. After working for a few weeks, he went to Oaxaca with his friends to spend a few stress-free days, but he ended up losing his life. While visiting Chacagua Island on May 11th, they met a man called Cruz Irving Martinez Flores on the boat that took them to the island. Martinez told them that he was a surf instructor and they could contact him if they wanted to participate in water sports. He also told them that he was a local and could help them whenever they needed.
When they arrived on the island, he told them he was from there and that whatever they needed, he would be around the coast.
On the next day, Benjamin and his friends saw Martinez roaming around on the beach. Benjamin approached him and asked him where he could buy surfboards, but Martinez looked appalled and acted as if he was talking to a stranger.
The guy looked at him angrily, as if he didn't know him.
Benjamin was confused at his reaction and walked away from him. But then, out of nowhere, Martinez ran toward him with a machete in his hand, and he attacked Benjamin. As his friends tried to stop him, Martinez attacked them too.
The only thing he said to him was, "They sent you, they sent you."
Medical help arrived and Benjamin was immediately taken to the hospital, but he lost his life the next day. Martinez was arrested. No one knew why Martinez attacked him, but an investigation found that he had previous links with a cartel and suspected that he could have been under the influence of substances when he attacked the three friends. Earlier, in April 2023, Mexican authorities found 4 bodies at a resort in Cancun, which resulted from a random brawl and gunfight between groups of men.
That shooting happened just behind the beach here, on the beach behind me. This is one of the most popular tourist strips in all of Cancun. Dozens of hotels and resorts right now packed with tourists on spring break.
A man named David Gregorian was vacationing at the Fiesta Americana Condesa Hotel. The incident took place near his hotel. He was strolling outside the beautiful resort with his family when he heard the noise of bullets being fired. He initially dismissed them as construction sounds.
The immediate thing that kind of caused us to stop in our tracks was just a series of consistent gunshots. So just pop, 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 pop. So we immediately turned around and tried to go away from it.
And the worst part is that there's no way to save the tourists once the attacks begin. During that incident, the majority of the tourists present in that area didn't have a clue about what was going on. There was no way to alert them or communicate the incidents. This could jeopardize more lives.
There was no announcements, there's no phone calls, there's no alerts, there's nothing to alert people that something had happened.
These gunfights are not that uncommon in tourist spots. In January 2022, a gunfight in a resort in Playa del Carmen ended up claiming the lives of 2 Canadians and severely wounded one.
This unverified video purports to show the chaos after the shooting at Hotel Xcaret that left 2 Canadians dead and 1 wounded, according to Mexican authorities.
Reportedly, 2 guests started arguing, and it eventually led them to draw weapons and engage in a battle.
The shooting happened after an argument between the guests. This is the hotel guest responsible for the shooting.
In March 2023, Sisters Maritza Rios and Marina Rios and their friend Dora Sayans from Texas visited Mexico for a holiday. When they didn't contact their families for a few days, they filed a police complaint at the local police station. An investigation revealed that Mexican locals had seen the 3 women riding a car and going to a market. No one saw them after that, and no one knew where they went. Police suspected that they had been abducted.
Police say the 3 women were last headed to a flea market in a green pickup truck. Their family now suspects they were kidnapped.
As of December 2023, their case is still unsolved. No one knows what happened to them or where they went. No one called their families for ransom, or their bodies weren't found anywhere. The case is pending at the station, and their dear ones are still waiting for their return. Another incident in March 2023 shook the world. 4 friends, U.S. citizens, Washington McGee, Eric Williams, Shaeed Woodard, and Zindell Brown, drove into Tamaulipas, Mexico for a short tour. One of them had plastic surgery scheduled in Mexico. Unfortunately, as soon as they crossed the borders, they discovered themselves in the middle of a cartel war. Police found surveillance footage during the investigation. It showed that the 4 friends were panicking when the firing began. Cartel members pulled them out of their vehicle and dragged them into their cars. The helpless victims didn't have any other option but to follow them.
4 Americans driving from South Carolina into northeast Mexico were mistakenly targeted by cartel gunmen. Video showing their violent abduction after authorities say the cartel members opened fire.
After a thorough search, the police found all 4 of them in a rural area in Mexico. 2 of them had passed away, and the other 2 were wounded and scared. Police gave them primary medical treatment and sent them to the United States.
2 of the 4 longtime friends were killed. The remaining 2 survivors returning home just last week.
The families of the deceased demanded justice, but given Mexico's history of violence and the reluctance of the authorities to take a step against them, it's highly unlikely that they will do anything. Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has been receiving criticism since the beginning of his tenure for his inaction against Mexican narcotics cartels. These cartels are the pioneers of all violence in the country.
Add to the 27,478 homicides nationwide since President Andrés Manuel López Obrador entered office.
Locals claimed that many civilians, as well as law enforcement officers, were meeting a tragic end because the officers weren't well trained to fight cartels or organize criminals.
You sent innocent people to their deaths. Why didn't you train them to defend themselves? These boys were 18 and 19 years old. Now they're dead.
A poll conducted in 2019 revealed that Mexican citizens considered their living conditions unsafe.
In a national public security poll conducted by the government in the summer, more than 70% of people say they consider the city they live in unsafe.
The president acknowledged the ongoing violence, but he also assured people that his administration is taking necessary steps to control the incidents.
There's a lack of peace in the country, but we will achieve it. However, there is momentum behind this problem. It was allowed to grow for far too long, but we will find a way to resolve it.
But locals don't know when they will see some actual progress. Guns, violence, and narcotics. These have turned into the reality of today's Mexico. Once the country was a popular destination for travelers. It has scenic places and mouth-watering cuisine, but all of those are overshadowed by tales of brutality, bloodshed, and gang rivalries. If the authorities of the country can't ensure the safety of the tourists, the world will soon be forced to turn their backs on Mexico, even the good things the country has to offer. Do you have any stories about tourist abductions in Mexico? Have your close ones faced any such incidents while on a vacation? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.